to this meeting of the West Prairie Sound Recreation and Culture Center Board. My name is Donald Sanderson, and it's my privilege to chair this evening's meeting. Madam Clerk, could you confirm for us that we have quorum, please?
Yes, Chair Sanderson, we do a quorum with all voting members attending and non-voting members who are appointed also attending.
Thank you very much. And just before we have roll call, it's my pleasure. There's a few there's one new non-voting member joining us this evening, and that is from Saxon First Nation, and that is Councillor Chance King. And welcome to our proceedings this evening. And some of you were able to meet Deb Pegamagabo as well, and Deb is the Director of Health at the Wasauksing First Nation, and is a new member of our steering committee. So we welcome you both. And let's proceed with roll call, if we may, Madam Clerk.
Yes, so just for the benefit of the public, I'll ask in order if those members and call those members' names, if they could just please say yes or present. So Archipelago Reeve Bert Liverance.
Present.
Carling Councillor Terry Gilbert.
Present.
Thank you. McDougall Mayor Dale Robinson.
Present.
McKellar Councillor Morley Hascom. I can see that McKellar Councillor Morley Hascom is there, but I haven't heard him indicate present. I'll come back to Councillor Hascom. Parry Sound Mayor Jamie McGarvey.
Present.
Seguin Councillor Terry Fellner.
Present.
Wasauksing Councillor Chance Padanaquat King. Saw a nod. And McKellar Councillor Morley Hascom. So Chair Sanderson, we can't hear Councillor Hascom, but I can see that he is online, and perhaps his microphone will work later. We do have quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And we will move on to the agenda, which is the first item of business. And is there anything to add to this evening's agenda? Yes, Mayor Robinson.
Yeah, if we could add an item, I guess it would be 3.9 for an update on the acquisition of the property at the YMCA. I'm not sure if that has to go in the closed session or not. Maybe just a suggestion in the future, rather than have to add it this way, if we could just have like a matters arising or new business session on the agenda.
Noted. Any other matters? Then may I have a motion to that the agenda for the December 7th, 2021, it's actually December 8th, 2021 West Prairie Sound Recreation and Culture Center Board is hereby approved as amended. Moved by Reeve Liverance, seconded by Mayor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Item 1.3 is the declaration of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have an interest to declare? Hearing none, we will move on to item 1.4, which is the approval of the minutes. And may I have a mover to move that the minutes of the September 10th, 2021 West Prairie Sound Recreation and Culture Center Board be approved as circulated. Moved by Mayor McGarvey, seconded by Councillor Fellner. Are there any questions, concerns, errors, or omissions with respect to those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much. Item 2 is correspondence, and you'll see from your package that there are 4 separate pieces of correspondence, and I would ask Madam Clerk to to provide us with a brief synopsis of those pieces of correspondence.
Certainly. So some of these letters were received some months ago and may even have been addressed to individuals or organizations other than explicitly to the board, which hadn't been formed yet. However, the content of the letter suggests they should be forwarded to the board for the record and potentially referred on. First two letters were received over the last months from Rob West of Orville. He's advocating that the new Recreation and Cultural Center be named after Francis Pegamagabal. The second letter is from Chief Warren Tababadong of Wissahickon First Nation, who wrote in May expressing support for the center and appreciation for the work gone into this initiative, and noted that information received to date had indicated there wasn't a need for Wissahickon First Nation itself to contribute to operation and maintenance of the center. The Chief Tababadong also wrote that an acknowledgement of the land that the center would be located on is of the Robinson-Huron Treaty, which includes Wissahickon First Nation, and an acknowledgement sign at the Recreation and Cultural Center would promote good relations. The third letter is from Ashley Lawrence Leger, expressing interest in inclusion of tennis courts at the new center. Ms. Lawrence Leger will be contacting the tennis club president with respect to potential funding to help ensure the inclusion of tennis courts at the center if that's possible. And the last letter is from John Meyer, chair of the Parry Sound Area Active Transportation. The organization feels that it is important that site selection and design of the center prioritize principles of energy efficiency and sustainability, for example, by maximizing active transportation access for staff and users. So as such, Parry Sound Area Active Transportation made recommendations in the letter with respect to location, i.e. within easy walking and cycling distance, and access such as at end of trip facilities, such as bike racks, that there be walking facilities, outdoor exercise, integration with long-range plans, for example, potentially being a hub of the region's walking and cycling route and trail system, environmental and energy leadership, we believe is important with energy efficient design and provision of EV charging stations. So all these letters have been acknowledged as received and are referred also as appropriate to the steering committee for consideration at the various stages of development and design of the project. And that's the correspondence.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And that takes us to item 3, which is the First Nations Advisory Board members. And you'll see in your package that I had a brief report included for this evening's meeting. I would also like to share with you that I had the privilege of presenting to the Wissahickon First Nation Chief and Council on the 16th of November. And at that time, Chance was there as well as Deb, and our Chief Wally King was there, and he acknowledged the participation of the council and the in the process so far. Appreciated being kept informed as partners, and Chance reinforced to me the importance of that the representation would be sincere and genuine and not token. And I provided my assurances that in fact that is certainly our intent. So we welcome your full participation and appreciate you being here this evening. I will have the privilege of presenting to Shawnigan First Nation tomorrow in the afternoon, and I will provide an update at our next meeting. It is hoped that they will also be able to identify a non-voting member to the committee. Wissahickon has also identified Councillor Lindsay McConnell as an alternate non-voting member, so we appreciate that. Any questions with respect to 3.1? May I have a motion to receive that report? Moved by Reeve Liverance, seconded by Mayor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you very much. The next item is our steering committee structure. And there is a briefing note in your package along with the recommendation that the report on the steering committee structure be received for information purposes. And I you will see from there that that the chair and the vice chair of the steering committee have been identified as Mr. Clayton Harris and Jason Inwood as vice chair. Jason will be primarily responsible for the construction and project management, the lead or the contact individual for that, and Mr. Harris for governance matters and operational. So I think it's helpful to have those the differentiation and certainly full participation from all of the members of the steering committee. They've done considerable work since last we met. So, are there any, Mr. Harris, is there anything that you would like to bring to our attention?
Just Mr. Chair, through you, that this is a large, complex project. There was a lot of work done to get to this point, but it's going to get more complex, involving more parties, ISIP, YMCA, the project manager, and so on. And the steering committee thought it was appropriate to add clarity for anybody interacting with the steering committee, who to contact. And so that's why we put this forward. There's a number of items on this evening's agenda that the steering committee has put forward. And I just want to thank all members of the steering committee, because these items get a lot of discussion at the steering committee level before they move on to the board. And so there's a lot of time committed to these reports and discussions before they get here. And I want to thank everybody for their assistance to get us to this point. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions on the structure.
Any questions for Mr. Harris or Mr. Inwood? Yes, Reeve Leverance.
So am I correct in my understanding that, you know, you're the chair and the vice chair, but that there are the consultation with the respective CAOs is also part of that steering committee?
Through the chair, absolutely. I think we've met 3 or 4 times since the board was formed in September, and things get circulated 2 or 3 times for comment. Later on, there's terms of reference for a fundraising and sponsorship committee that went through the group 2 or 3 times. So yeah, very much so. This is a very consultative process.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much to all of the members of our steering committee for all of the diligent work that you're doing on our behalf. That's very much appreciated. Item 3.3 is the corporate bank account. And as per the briefing note, you can see that the board will be receiving and dispersing significant funds. It's in excess of $34 million project. And in order to do that, we are asking for authorization to open a bank account with Scotiabank as per the attached note. And may I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Moved by Mayor McGarvey, seconded by Councillor Gilbert. And are there any questions with respect to that recommendation? Yes, so Reeve Leverance.
So not so much about opening the checking account itself, but more about the accountability. I mean, are we going to have the statements audited on an annual basis? What is their fiduciary responsibility in this respect?
Through the chair, I mean, we haven't made that any recommendations to the board, but certainly there needs some kind of independent third party, whether it's an audit or there's an audit or an accountant's comments, which is a little less assurance than an audit, but it's done by an outside professional. KPMG, for example, could do an accountant's comments, could do an audit opinion. That decision will be made by the board later on. In terms of accountability, the chair and vice chair are signing authorities. So that adds an element of control over funds. Plus, this project, there's a lot of accountability of spending funds with the federal provincial government. So there's a lot of eyes overseeing what's going on, but certainly the significant public funds involved. So We want this to be as, and I think the word used earlier was transparent. There's a lot of accountability that we want to make sure happens. So,
Did the grants impose any auditing requirements upon us?
through the chair, yes, there's regular reporting that's required. They will review what we submit for expense recovery and make sure that it meets the program requirements that the grant is based on, that there's no ineligible expenses. So they'll be looking at that closely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? And so then may I have a, sorry, all in favor? And opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you very much. And item 3.4 is with respect to the insurance coverage. And there is also in our package a note that staff be directed to obtain $5 million in general liability insurance and errors or omission insurance. I think we would all be very interested in that. May I have a motion to accept that recommendation, and then we'll have questions. Moved by Reeve Liverance and seconded by Councillor Fellner, and we're open for questions. Yes, Mayor Robinson.
Oh, you got Reeve Liverance, got Reeve Reverence. That's a new one. Do we have any pricing yet on that? And I was just going to, without divulging that pricing, I was going to suggest, as always, since we are dealing with public funds, it would be good to get at least 2 quotes for the insurance. It shouldn't be that onerous to get a second quote out there. I know we're in a very unsavory insurance market right now, but it would be good to have 2 quotes if that's possible. So I guess back to you, Mr. Chair, to the steering committee, if they've got 1 quote so far and if they're looking at getting a second one.
Through the chair, we our initial inquiry was through BFL, which provides insurance to the town. It was just convenient to have a conversation with them and understand the type of insurance that we might need at this phase, which is early days planning phase. And of course, the insurance requirements are going to increase as we move through construction and operation, and we own the land, and there's chances for liability and so on. No problem getting a second quote. What our insurance provider said, this is a very small project or organization to insure. They normally wouldn't consider it, but because it's affiliated with a municipality and the insurance company for the municipality, that they would give us a quote. We can look at one of the other municipal insurers that see if we can get a second quote. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And may I, all in favor, please? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you. Ms. Johnson reminds me that I have skipped over item 3.2, which is the committee structure, and that's really important. If you'll bear with me, please, and move back 2 items to our committee structure, and that just to have a mover and a seconder for that, please. And that was Mayor Robinson and Mayor McGarvey, and I believe that we did have discussion on that. So if we could have a vote again, please, if you would indulge me, all in favor. Opposed, if any. Thank you. I'll get the hang of this sooner or later. And that takes us to item 3.5, which is the fundraising and sponsorship team terms of reference. And the steering committee has provided a draft terms of reference with the recommendation that those terms of reference for fundraising and sponsorship be approved as outlined in the attached Schedule A. CAO Inwood is here and available to speak to the specifics of that, those draft terms of reference. If there are specific questions, may I have a mover to get that on the table first, please? Councillor Fellner, and seconded by Councillor Gilbert, and we are open for discussion. CAO Inwood, is there anything that you would like to bring to our attention?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report is pretty fulsome and it's a set of recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think we all understand the value and importance of fundraising and sponsorship in such a significant initiative. And this sets the framework on how we proceed with the fundraising and sponsorship efforts in the months and years to come.
Thank you very much. Any specific questions? All right, are you ready for the question? All in favor? And opposed, if any? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much. And item 3.6 is the branding strategy and website development. And you will see that there is a briefing note in our packages with a recommendation that the steering committee be directed to issue an RFP for branding, website, digital asset development with an upset limit not to exceed $30,000. And that report is in our package. And again, Jason CAO Inwood is available to answer any specific questions. May I have a motion to get that on the table? Liverance, and seconded by Mayor McGarvey. And we're open for questions and comments. Yes, Liverance.
So Jason, would it be possible to find a local provider for this service? Or do we have to look outside of our West Prairie Sound area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Reeve Liverance, excuse me, our due diligence would see us issue an RFP, and while local bidders would be welcome to bid, it would also be open beyond that. But the exercise of the RFP would ensure that we get the best product with the best pricing that we possibly can for the deliverables that we outline in that RFP. So can't guarantee necessarily that it would be local, but it certainly would be open to local establishments, local companies that would like to bid.
So in the evaluation criteria, would you not give additional points for a local company versus just a generic one?
Industry best practice doesn't necessarily identify their home location or business establishment as something that you would evaluate. But if that's something that the board would like us to consider, I can take that under advisement and we can see what we can come up with.
Well, if you want my point of view, I believe that we should be supporting our local businesses. So if we could add some language to that effect and add some of in terms of the evaluation criteria, I think that would be goodness for our area.
Any other comments by committee members? Mayor Robinson.
If this was just a website strategy, I would have a concern at this point in time, given $30,000 expenditure. But I'm assuming there's more to this, given the branding strategy as part of it. So maybe someone on the steering committee can kind of expand on that portion of it. And then the other part of it, and the financial part of this, is that this is to be funded by future sponsorship. So I'm not sure how we do something today and fund it from money in the future from a sponsor.
Mr. Chair, perhaps I'll start us off with the branding component of this strategy is perhaps one of the more significant pieces. As we start to venture off into fundraising and sponsorship, we need to have an identity, we need to have a logo, we need to have the marketing materials that allows us to sell ourselves as part of our sponsorship and funding campaign. Further to that, the funds for website development, digital media would, I don't believe they would be eligible under the grant funding. So what we would likely do, and I'll look to Mr. Harris just to confirm, is that we would borrow that money in advance from the cash call that you'll discuss a little bit later on, and then pay it back once those funds have been raised.
Through the chair, that's correct. That was the strategy. Because I think with the plan is to raise significant dollars, and the branding strategy is directly tied to generating that look, the branding, this look and feel, and to generate those dollars. Seemed like there was a logical connection there. The alternative would be to request each of the municipalities to proportionately contribute non-eligible funding that isn't eligible under the grant program.
Mayor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to hear that the branding to me is the biggest component of this. We don't need just another website out there at this point in time, certainly. But from what I'm hearing, I'm happy to hear that steering committee has that well in hand, and that they are looking at the branding as being the main part of this. Which probably takes it outside the local purview in terms of being able to provide that part of it. But I agree with Reeve Leverance. If we can do something local, that would certainly be nice. But at the end of the day, we also have to look at the funding too. These are all public funds that we're using, so we have to be cognizant of that. So anyway, thank you very much for clarifying that for me. Thank you.
Are members satisfied with that awareness of the steering committee, but without modifying the recommendation? The recommendation will stand as is. And if we would vote, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that motion or the recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. You will have noticed that yesterday you received a fairly large communique with respect to the RFP for project management. And it has been developed and discussed through the steering committee. And this evening we'll be dealing with a recommendation that the steering committee be directed to issue that attached RFP, subject to a review by legal, insurance, and other professionals as necessary for owner's representative services and capital project manager. You'll see also that our RFP was being reviewed at the time of the agenda, but that was received yesterday. So as well, so may I have a mover and a seconder to get that on the table? Moved by Reeve Leverance, seconded by Councillor Gilbert, and we are open for discussion. Yes, Councillor.
So I have a question. So the RFP that we were sent, it says in the, and I'm assuming it only says this because the document wasn't quite finalized before they sent it to us, but has this document already been gone through all the appropriate reviews? So is it ready to issue if we approve it? I guess is my question. If it's approved tonight, is it ready to issue tomorrow?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to respond. It is ready to go. There are some minor details specifically with the fact that the town of Parry Sound will be the agency that releases it. So there are a couple of checks and balances that the town's purchasing folks will go through to ensure that their appropriate policies are in place and referenced, and the dates and etc. are draft. But what you see before you is a final product ready to go.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Robinson.
I just saw that lengthy document today. It is lengthy and very complex, which it needs to be in this situation. And I'm sure it's all in there, but the real key here is to make sure there's a lot of communication between all levels here, the steering committee and this board, because we're talking with this project manager being involved with the actual design of it and then the build of it. So it's extremely complex, and congratulations to the steering committee members. I think Mr. Inwood probably was the lead on that in terms of getting that set up and going. So anyway, the devil's in the detail. But it's at the end of the day, the spirit of it will rule. And I think the spirit is that we just need a whole lot of communication to make sure that we get exactly what we've all been looking for, which it's been said, I think, a few times, is we're not looking for the Taj Mahal here, but we're certainly looking for our best bang for a buck in terms of getting a facility that will suit the needs of all our residents. And I believe that's in there, but it's a lengthy read for sure on it. So might be dawn, but I guess that's part of the process, is those who can't handle that terms of reference, they probably shouldn't be bidding on it in the first place. So anyway, this is a very key component to this whole project being successful, is how this RFP goes through. So anyway, I just want to stress that point, I guess, is communication throughout this whole issue with the project manager. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Robertson. Absolutely. It's a very critical position, and to help us deliver the project on time and on budget. And I appreciate the significant amount of work conducted by the steering committee and with Mr. Inwood's leadership. Is there anything, Jason, Mr. Inwood, that you would like to bring to our attention around the RFP?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think Mayor Robinson hit the nail on the head. Communication is fundamental in this exercise. I've built a couple buildings in my day, and those that can communicate have successful relationships with the board, with councils. And in this case, there is language that confirms routine, regular updates, progress, status updates. So you should expect, the board should expect some routine and regular updates from this project manager. It'll be one of the fundamental components of our evaluation. And to your point, this is a really key component to taking us from where we are today to shovel in the ground. And without this resource in place, it's going to be very, very difficult. And we're quite looking forward to getting the right firm, the right agency in place to help us move on to the next steps.
Absolutely. Yes, Reeve Liverance.
So I've got a question on page 24 of the RFP. You're allowing for basically a month for people to submit a proposal. Is that enough time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, draft dates on there, but we do anticipate about a month to be a standard process for this. I've gone through this exercise a number of times, and with a month, you usually have plenty of time. So again, the board would have the right, if we weren't receiving the appropriate number of responses or we weren't satisfied with the responses, we have the right to extend. And so we would exercise that if that was the case.
But your anticipation is that an experienced project manager could in fact answer this RFP in about a month?
That is my experience, and I would suspect yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, observations? Significant piece of work. Thank you very much. Are we ready for the question then? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Mr. Councillor Haskam, was that in favor or an opposed? So we're having trouble with your, was that a thumbs up? Thank you very much. Maybe there's just a bit of a delay there. I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So we are unanimous and in favor, and that is carried. And that takes us to item 3.8, which is the cash flow request from our funding partners. And you will see from the briefing note, there's a recommendation that the board send a request to the funding partners to submit the respective share of an initial funding request to total $200,000. And the details of allocation are included in the note. And may I have a mover and a seconder to get that on the table for discussion, please?
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Fellner and seconded by Mayor McGarvey. And we are open for discussion. I think it's consistent with what you have been looking at all along in terms of the funding allocations, and it's a large $34 million project. So this is the first call. And not seeing any more comments or questions. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And the 3.9 is that we had an addition to the agenda to receive a property acquisition update, and I would ask for just a clarification from Madam Clerk. Does this matter go into closed? Or CAO Harris?
At some point, the acquisition of land would be a closed matter, but I think we could provide a high level status of where we are in those discussions with the Y without breaching any confidentiality concerns. So as we advised the Wellness Center and Pool Committee previously, that the Y is certainly open to donating the land. We've received an MOU, a draft. It was a preliminary draft, their first draft. Mr. Inwood and I met with the new CEO of the Y, who started in December, and her team probably 2-3 weeks ago to review the draft. It was a very good meeting, lasted for a couple of hours, and some suggestions, a number of suggestions that we had, they didn't have a problem with them, with the suggestions. They were going to take that MOU back, and we had concepts where we agreed to, they were going to put some words to it. We agreed that we would finalize an MOU, which is really setting the stage how the land will get transferred. And also we had talked about an operating agreement with the YMCA. That's going to be something that we need to have in place. So the first step would be get an MOU so we all understand the path forward. Work to have the land transferred in the name of the board by first quarter, if between the first quarter and the end of the second quarter, and then we would finalize also the operating agreement. So the discussions have been, we've got a draft MOU we're working on. Discussions are positive, and they're very supportive of, nothing has changed from their point in terms of their willingness to work with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mayor Robinson.
This is the foundation for where we're going forward here. So I would, if we're looking at timing, I would suggest the end of the second or the end of the first quarter it would be the latest date that I would be comfortable with. And an MOU is not a legal binding document, but I'm not going to say any more unless we want to go into a closed session on it. But if the steering committee is comfortable with where we're going at this point in time, but this is a very early building block for us, and it needs to certainly be clarified in contract form. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
I think through the chair, I think we all agree it's foundational. It's absolutely critical to get the land in the town's and the board's name, as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Reeve Liverance.
Yeah, I'll echo Dale's comments. Talk is cheap until it's on paper and a contract. It's happy talk.
Duly noted. Any other questions or comments? And may I have, I'm sorry, I didn't write down, did we have a mover and a seconder to receive the property acquisition update?
Mr. Chair, it's probably not required, I wouldn't think, but you probably just accept, this is just direction from the board to the steering committee, I would think. The clerk may correct me on that, or one of the steering committee members.
Madam Clerk, will that suffice?
I believe direction to the board with an aim for a response in a more binding format by the end of the first quarter is what is the direction.
Direction, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that to our attention and for the work of the steering committee to bring that important element to fruition. So that brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Is there anything else that should properly become before this august body? We have, it is the intention that Vice Chair Bagarvi and myself will work with the steering committee to execute the ICIP agreement, hopefully by the end of the year. Our term as chair and vice chair expires at that time, and I believe we will. We would be calling. This group will meet again at the end of the first quarter, and at that time you may well you will deal with issues of leadership of your board. So thank you very much for the trust that you have invested in me and the ability to.
Chair Sanderson, I see a hand up from Councillor King.
Yes, I'm sorry, Councillor King. Sorry, we're just having hearing. Now we can.
For me this time?
Yes, could you turn it up just a little bit, Chance?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just going to speak up a little louder.
That's good. Thank you.
I just had a question that I wanted to see if I can get answered here. It's about the word cultural that's in the title of that. I just want to ask, like, what does like culture mean to the board? What does that mean to you guys?
If I can speak up, I'll go first. Culture to me is your story. It's your history. It's your roots.
Thank you, Reverence. I saw that Mayor McGarvey had his hand up as well.
Yeah, I think the culture to me means the culture of the area from the beginning, which represents the First Nations communities that are here and basically pioneered the area and lived here for generations upon generations. And then moving forward, we're in this together now. We're here. So we start at the beginning. And to me, and I've mentioned this to the chief of Wasauksing and the former chief of Shawanaga, that it would be really nice if we actually on a wall coming in that everyone could see that we had a copy of the Robinson-Huron Treaty. And so that it was in large print, so you didn't have to read it with your glasses on. But that is a foundation for this particular area. And we are lucky to be in a treaty area with that, and we should support that. So I think people need to know the history of this particular area, its foundation, so that moving forward, I think we have a better partnership with our First Nations and an understanding of how we can move forward better together. And I think part of it is having that on display so that people can read it and understand the extent of what that treaty means. Chance, does that make sense?
Wanted to hear what culture means on your side, because it's going to be different between you and I, because that word, when I see it up there, I just don't want it to be something that's there to simply be a token. Like, that's
No.
okay, we've included the First Nations, or we have the word cultural in here, like our reconciliation's done, type of thing. And I just want to really make sure that that isn't what it becomes. So I want to know, I want to get an idea of where you're heading with this. Having already included the word cultural before myself or any other First Nation had come on, I just want to know, like, I need to make sure it's heading in the right direction, so that I can protect and make sure things are done properly for future generations. So that's really important to me. Another question that I had, if we're going to be moving forward with the cultural in the title, yes, like that's. I was, when Donald had come to the council meeting, I had he had said that there was a portion of funding that was gained with including the First Nations. So I was just kind of curious if I could see that, and possibly like where it came from, like if like what grant funding organizations, if possible. I
was going to say Mr. Harris might have a better idea of that, but I'm not sure whether we actually, I mean, I think we were better together. Everybody was better together, but I'm not sure whether we actually gained any extra funding because of that.
Okay, because I was just curious. I was just curious if there had been funds gained, like using the word cultural. So I just needed to make sure, like, if there was any and where they're coming from, and how it might impact the community, like our community, or the Indigenous community.
Thank you for speaking up, Councillor, and for asking for the clarification. I hope that I didn't misspeak, but I believe that my intention was to indicate that including our First Nation and Indigenous partners, that our application was stronger. There was nothing in the evaluation that I'm aware of that included that, or so gave us extra points or specific money, but it's something that we did intentionally and sincerely. And as I said, this is about being transparent and accountable to everyone. And it certainly includes our Indigenous partners. And I'm really pleased that you're here this evening, that you're comfortable speaking up, and that you will hold us accountable. So I also indicated to you through my we are on a journey of understanding and reconciliation, and it's important for us all to do more listening than talking. And I'm very much looking forward to learning from you and our other Indigenous representatives to remind us of what's important and to educate us. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
Okay. Yes. I definitely will be here to make sure things are done in a good way.
We're counting on that.
Thank you for including me. So I'll definitely be here throughout the process, and we'll definitely work together to try to make sure that the representation is actually authentic and actually helpful, and not something that's there to be slapped up on a wall for the non-Indigenous communities to, just kind of see in passing. It needs to be something, that's actually, that a little more than just that. So yeah, anyways, those were my questions, and that's all I had. Unfortunately, sorry, I forgot to say, add me to the agenda, but I realized we were ending the meeting and I wasn't able to ask my questions yet, so I just raised my hand.
Thank you. A good chair would recognize that. Miigwetz.
Yeah, yeah, Jimmy Gwetch, guys. That's all those were the only questions that I had.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gwetch.
Any other items of business or comments before we adjourn? So the meeting will be, the next meeting will be at the call of the chair, and we'll work with the steering committee and Clerk Johnson to get the minutes out, to continue to communicate and keep you apprised of our progress. Thank you for investing your valuable time with us this evening. And thank you, Forrest, and thank you, Rebecca, for supporting us, and for all the members of the steering committee as well. And I wish you a pleasant evening, a safe evening. Please remain vigilant and take care of each other.
Get your booster.
Get your booster, yeah. Merry
Good night.
Christmas, everybody. Happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas.